Everyone assumed Daphne Okafor had stolen from Real Hargrove. 2 days before the most anticipated gala in Montreal's underworld calendar, his quiet plus-size accountant had vanished from the 42nd floor of Hargrove Tower, taking nothing but her coat and a single USB drive loaded with encrypted financial records that nobody outside the inner circle even knew existed. His lawyers called it embezzlement. His head of security called it treason. His fiancée, Sable, called it something far worse. She called it predictable. "Women like that always crack eventually," Sable said, adjusting her diamond earring in the mirror of his penthouse office. "Too much access, not enough loyalty." Rael said nothing. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the St. Lawrence, his hands behind his back, his expression unreadable. The city moved 30 stories below him, indifferent as always. He had built an empire on reading people, on knowing within 30 seconds whether someone across a negotiating table was lying, performing, or genuinely afraid. In 3 years, Daphne Okafor had never given him a single reason to doubt her. She remembered quarterly filings that his entire legal team missed. She caught a discrepancy in a dummy shell company that his own auditors had cleared twice. She came in on Christmas Eve once because she noticed an error in a routing number and couldn't let it sit. People like that didn't steal. People like that got stolen from. "Find her," he said quietly, and walked out of the room before Sable could answer. Daphne had worked for the Hargrove Group for 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days. She had not planned to count, but time had a way of marking itself when you spent most of it invisible. She was not the kind of woman people noticed when she walked into a room. She knew that. She had made her peace with it somewhere around her 27th birthday, sitting in a break room eating a sandwich alone, while 3 of her colleagues celebrated a promotion she had also applied for. The hiring manager had said they'd gone in a different direction. They always went in a different direction when Daphne was the other option. Too quiet, maybe. Too easy to overlook. Too much body, taking up too little space in the room. What they never understood was that being invisible was also a skill. In 3 years inside the Hargrove Group, Daphne had learned the shape of every secret the organization carried. Not because anyone told her, but because when you are the woman no one notices sitting behind the ledger, people say things around you that they would never say in front of a witness. She knew which shell companies were genuine holding vehicles and which ones existed to quietly funnel money toward people whose names never appeared on any org chart. She knew which board member owed Real a favor and which ones feared him. She knew the gala next Friday was not simply a celebration of the Hargrove Group's 30th anniversary. She had found that out 6 weeks ago, by accident, sitting in a glass-walled conference room while 3 men in expensive suits forgot she was there. The gala was a transfer point, under the cover of 200 guests and a charity auction. 3 separate financial instruments, hidden inside the gala's event contracts, would move controlling shares of the Hargrove shipping network out of Real's name and into the hands of a numbered company registered in the Cayman Islands. The numbered company belonged to a man named Aldous Fenwick. Aldous Fenwick was Real's future father-in-law, and the authorization codes on every document bore the digital signature of Sable Hargrove. Not Sable Kensington, the fiancée. Sable Hargrove, as though she were already signing as owner. Daphne had spent 4 weeks trying to figure out what to do with that information. She copied everything to an encrypted drive. She verified the documents 3 times. She told herself she would find the right moment. And then, 8 days ago, someone had broken into her apartment. They hadn't taken anything. They had only moved things. Just enough to let her know they had been there. Her laptop was 2 inches from where she'd left it. Her filing cabinet was unlocked. The USB drive she kept in her desk drawer had been replaced with an identical blank one. They knew she had run that same night, because Daphne Okafor was smart enough to understand that the window between they know and they act was not wide. She took almost nothing: her coat, the real USB drive, which she had hidden inside the lining of her winter jacket 6 weeks earlier, the moment she realized what she was looking at. A change of clothes, her mother's phone number, written on a piece of paper, because she didn't trust anything digital anymore. She checked into a motel on the outskirts of Laval, under a name that wasn't hers, paid cash, and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a very long time. She had not eaten in 2 days when they found the motel. She heard them on the stairs, 2 sets of footsteps, deliberate, not the kind that belonged to travelers. She was already on her feet when the door gave way. What happened in the next 90 seconds was not something she had planned for, because Daphne had spent her entire career behind a desk, not fighting. She made it to the bathroom. She got the door locked. She pressed herself against the cold tile wall and held the USB drive so tightly the casing left marks on her palm. The bathroom lock held for 40 seconds. When it gave, she was already on the floor. Real found out about the motel from a source he had not told his security team about. An old contact from his early years in the city, a man named Brennan, who ran a cash-and-carry motel operation and owed Real a debt that predated everything else. Brennan had called not because he wanted to, but because the 2 men who'd shown up asking about a woman matching Daphne's description had done so in a way that made Brennan nervous. They were too confident, too certain she was there. That kind of certainty came from inside information. Real drove to Laval alone. His head of security, a man called Shepard, had argued against it. Too exposed, too risky, let the team handle it. Real had looked at him calmly and said, "If there's a leak inside the team, then the team is the last thing I'm sending." He took the black sedan. He left his phone with Shepard and took a burner instead. He drove with the quiet focus that had carried him through 30 years of decisions that no one outside his world would ever understand. He was not sure why he needed to go himself. He only knew that the idea of sending men who might be compromised to retrieve a woman who had risked her life too. What, exactly? What had she actually done? He didn't know yet. He only knew that Daphne Okafor had never done a single careless thing in 3 years, and whatever she had run with for a reason. The motel parking lot was quiet. Room 14 was at the end of the exterior corridor, its door slightly ajar. Something cold moved through Real's chest. He pushed the door open. The room was cold. The window was cracked, curtains drifting inward with the February air. The bed hadn't been slept in. A coat lay on the floor near the bathroom. Her coat, he recognized it, grey wool, the one she always wore to the office in winter, and beneath it, a dark stain on the linoleum that his stomach recognized before his brain did. Daphne. No answer. The bathroom door was ajar. He pushed it open. She was on the floor between the tub and the wall, her back against the tile, legs folded sideways beneath her. Her cardigan was torn at the shoulder. One hand pressed against her ribs. The fabric beneath it darkened and wet. The other hand, even now, even unconscious, was curled so tightly around a USB drive that her knuckles had gone white. Real crouched beside her. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck. Her pulse was there, thin and fast, like a thread pulled to its limit, but there, Daphne. He kept his voice level, the way he had taught himself to stay level in the middle of chaos. It's Real. Her eyes opened in fractions. She focused on his face slowly, the way someone surfacing from a very long depth focuses on light. When she recognized him, something happened in her expression that he had not expected. Not fear, not relief exactly. Something more exhausted than either. "You came," she said. "Yes, yourself. Yes." She closed her eyes briefly. "They're watching the building. There's a car on the service road." He had already seen it on the way in. "I know, the drive." Her fingers twitched. "Don't let them have it." "I won't." He covered her hand with his. "I need you to let go." She did, very slowly, like someone releasing something they'd been holding onto underwater. He slipped the drive into his interior pocket. "Can you tell me what's on it?" he asked. already pulling off his jacket to press against her side. She swallowed. Her voice was quiet, precise, even now. Sable. The Gala contracts. Your shipping network. A breath. Fenwick has been building the position for 8 months. The wedding was never about a merger. It was about what happens after the ceremony. When you're in the middle of signing the final documents and the security detail has already been replaced. Rael was still. Outside, February wind moved through the cracked window. Somewhere on the service road, a car engine idled. How long have you known? 6 weeks. Her eyes met his. I tried to find the right way to tell you. Then they got into my apartment. He looked at her. The torn cardigan, the borrowed room, the grip she had maintained on that drive even unconscious on a bathroom floor, and felt something shift in the geography of his chest. Something he hadn't moved in a long time. I'm going to pick you up, he said. Tell me if I hurt you. I'm fine. Tell me if I hurt you, he said again quietly, in a way that ended the discussion. He lifted her carefully, one arm under her knees, one behind her shoulders. She weighed less than he expected, and he did not know why that particular observation hit him so hard, except that he had called her his accountant for 3 years, and standing in a motel bathroom in Laval, holding a woman who had nearly died protecting him, he understood for the first time that he did not actually know anything about her. He carried her to the car. She stayed conscious the whole way, which he counted as a mercy. At the sedan, she caught his sleeve with her free hand. There are copies. Her voice was fraying at the edges, but her eyes were clear. I sent everything to a courier 2 days ago, a safety deposit box. My cousin has the key. Name, Beaumont Storage on Saint-Denis. Box 44. My cousin's name is Petra Calloway. The name was in the file of names Daphne hadn't been given. Raoul filed it without showing it. I'll handle it. If anything happens to me, nothing is going to happen to you. She looked at him for a long moment, measuring whether to believe that. He understood the evaluation. He had been measured by a lot of people. She was the first one in a long time whose judgment he actually wanted to pass. She leaned her head back against the seat. He drove. In the side mirror, the car on the service road didn't follow. It was already turning to make a call instead. The next 36 hours existed inside a very small circle of people. Raoul's personal physician, a retired surgeon, who asked no questions and expected the same courtesy in return, closed the wound and delivered her prognosis with the directness of someone who had done this before. 3 centimeters to the right, and the conversation would have been different. She needed rest, antibiotics, and 0 stress. She would get 2 of those 3 things. By the time Daphne was conscious enough to sit up and eat something, Raoul had the safety deposit box, his cousin Petra's confirmation that every document was intact, and a clearer picture of the operation than he had had at any point in the preceding 8 months. Sable Beaumont Fenwick, as she had apparently been filing internally since March, had constructed the acquisition with a patience and precision that, in another context, Raoul might have admired. Every layer had a legitimate explanation. The shell company looked like a standard liability protection vehicle. The Gala contracts were dense enough that only someone who understood how routing instruments worked inside marine insurance agreements would catch the mechanism buried on page 47. His own lawyers had reviewed the contracts twice and found nothing. Daphne had found it in an afternoon. He set up a laptop on the table beside her bed, and she worked through the documents with him for 4 hours, walking him through every mechanism, every authorization code, every digital breadcrumb trail she had mapped across 6 weeks of careful, secret analysis. She was still pale. She moved carefully, favoring her left side, but her voice was steady and her mind was exactly as precise as it had always been. And Raoul found himself thinking, not for the first time, how many meetings she had sat in on the edge of the room, folders on her lap, and how many of those meetings had been shaped, invisibly, by the woman everyone looked past. "The board meeting after the gala," she said, pulling up a flagged document. "See this clause. It reads like standard continuity language, but the succession of operational authority trigger activates if the primary signatory is, and I'm quoting directly, absent, incapacitated, or otherwise unable to perform. That language doesn't come from your standard corporate template. It was added in the revision cycle 2 months ago by someone with access to the internal document server. Who has that access?" She met his eyes. "3 people. Your legal director, your CFO," a pause, and Sable. The room was quiet for a moment. "The CFO has been on the Fenwick payroll since last spring," Daphne continued. She pulled up a transfer record. "I found the payments in a subsidiary ledger. Small enough to pass automated monitoring, but they run on a schedule that matches the revision cycle perfectly." Rael looked at the documents for a long time. Then he said something he did not say often to anyone. "I'm sorry." She looked at him. "I didn't ask you to carry this alone," he said. "I should have. I should have made it possible for you to come to me. I didn't." His voice was even, the way it always was, but the words behind it weren't. "You spent 6 weeks trying to figure out how to warn me, and the only reason it wasn't easier is because I built a structure where nothing flowed upward unless I asked for it. That's on me." Daphne was quiet for a moment. She looked down at the table. "I wasn't sure you'd believe me," she said. "Over Sabler. I believe evidence. I know. But I'm also—" She stopped. Started again. "I've been the accountant, the quiet one in the corner. When something goes wrong, it's not usually the woman with the folders who gets believed first." He looked at her without speaking for a moment. He thought about 3 years, the things he had not noticed, the things he had not asked. "I know," he said finally, and he meant it in a different way than she'd intended. Not as agreement with her assessment of herself, but as agreement with what she was describing about the world, a version of it he had benefited from without examining. "The gala is in 2 days," she said. "Yes. Are you going to cancel it?" He was quiet for a moment, then, "No." Her eyes sharpened. "You're going to let it run. Comfortable people make careless mistakes." He leaned back in his chair. "And I want every one of them to feel very comfortable for the next 48 hours." The night of the gala, Montreal wrapped itself in a February cold that turned breath to mist and made the lights along the waterfront look like something from a different, quieter century. The ballroom of the Hotel Beaupré occupied the entire mezzanine level, its arched windows facing the river, its chandeliers throwing gold across a room filled with 214 people who had dressed very carefully for an event they believed was a celebration. They were about to celebrate something entirely different than they expected. Rael arrived alone. That in itself was enough to generate whispers. He was supposed to arrive with Sable. They had planned their entrance for 3 weeks. Photographs, a specific positioning near the main staircase, a moment that would photograph beautifully for the society pages. Instead, Rael walked in through the east entrance, exchanged quiet words with the room's head of audiovisual, and took his place at the front of the room with the calm of a man who had already made every decision that mattered. Sable arrived 20 minutes later on her father's arm. She scanned the room, found Rael across the crowd, and smiled the kind of smile that was designed to be seen. She crossed toward him. She kissed his cheek. She whispered something that sounded affectionate and meant nothing. "You're late," he said pleasantly. "Fashionably," she said. "Of course." Behind him, discreetly positioned near the east wall, Shepard caught his eye and gave one small nod. Teams in position. Federal financial crimes investigators were already in the lobby, having arrived 90 minutes earlier through the service entrance. Shepard had delivered the complete evidence package before sunrise that morning. Every document, every transfer record, every authorization trail, copied in triplicate. Aldous Fenwick arrived at 9:15, moving through the room with the easy confidence of a man who believed the night was already won. He was not wrong exactly. The night was almost won, just not by him. The program proceeded. Speeches, a charitable auction, the kind of choreographed social performance that the city's moneyed circles had perfected over generations. Real stood through all of it with a patience that only people who had spent decades operating at this level could manufacture. Then came the moment that the Gala program listed as Remarks from the Hargrove Group Chairman. Real stepped to the podium. He thanked the guests. He acknowledged the occasion, and then he paused, in the particular way that made rooms go quiet, not because they expected something, but because something in the air changed. "I want to share something with you tonight," he said. "Something I discovered recently about what this organization is and what it owes to the people who have actually held it together." He nodded to the audiovisual desk. The chandeliers dimmed. On the 3 large screens positioned around the room, originally prepared for a tasteful anniversary retrospective, a document appeared. Then another. Then a third. Transfer records. Authorization codes. A corporate filing that listed Sable Hargrove Fenwick as primary operational signatory of the Hargrove shipping network, dated 4 months prior to the scheduled wedding. The room went very still. Aldous Fenwick's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Sable's smile held for 3 seconds. An impressive performance, Real thought, and then it didn't. "This acquisition," Real said, "was designed to be completed tonight. The mechanism was embedded in the Gala's own contractual framework, signing the event's closing documents. Something I was scheduled to do at the end of this evening would have triggered a succession clause, transferring operational authority of the Hargrove shipping network to a numbered company registered in the Cayman Islands." He let that sit for a moment. "That company belongs to Aldous Fenwick." The whispers had begun. They were moving through the room like water finding its level. The authorization codes on every document belonged to a system profile that was accessed, not by me, but by my fiancé. He glanced at Sable. "Former fiancé, turn it off!" Sable's voice was low and precise. She was looking at the audiovisual desk. "There are 14 backup copies," Real said pleasantly, "distributed to 14 separate locations before this evening began." Aldous Fenwick set his glass down on a passing tray and turned toward the east entrance. 3 men in suits stepped in front of him. Not Real's men, federal agents. "Mr. Fenwick." The lead investigator was a woman in her 40s, with the manner of someone who found this particular kind of evening professionally satisfying. "I have a warrant for your arrest. Conspiracy, financial fraud, and attempted corporate sabotage." She produced the document. "We'll also need to speak with Miss Sable Beaumont Fenwick regarding her role in the authorization chain." The CFO, a man who had been very carefully positioned near the back of the room all evening, nursing a scotch, made a move toward the west exit. He was met there by 2 more investigators. Sable looked at Real across the noise and disruption of the room, her expression cycling through things she didn't quite reach in time. Disbelief first, then calculation, then something that might have been genuine anger, though it was difficult to tell. With Sable, what was genuine? "You believed your accountant over me," she said. "I believed evidence," he said. "The evidence was assembled by my accountant." A pause. "Who is considerably more than that." The ballroom doors at the far end of the room opened. The crowd, still trying to understand what they were watching, turned. Daphne Okafor walked in. She moved carefully. Her ribs were still taped, and she held herself with the particular deliberateness of someone managing discomfort. But she walked in with her head up and her shoulders back, in a deep green dress she had not told anyone she owned. She was not wearing anything expensive. She was not performing anything. She simply walked across the floor of the Hotel Beaupré with the composure of someone who had spent 3 years being invisible and had decided, tonight, to stop. Every camera in the room swiveled toward her. Every journalist present immediately began trying to figure out who she was. The woman Sable had called a thief. The accountant everyone had dismissed. The plus-size woman who sat outside the executive suite and carried folders, and whom no one had bothered to learn the name of. She walked to the front of the room and placed a thick file of documents on the podium beside Real. "Original transfer records," she said. Her voice was clear and even. "Annotated ledger entries, and a timeline of the CFO's payments from the Fenwick subsidiary, broken down by transaction date." She looked out at the room without apology. "Every document has been verified by 2 independent forensic accountants and delivered to federal investigators." Her gaze moved briefly to Aldous Fenwick. "You assumed the paperwork would be too complex for anyone to follow." A pause. "You assumed wrong." For a moment, a very specific moment that people in that room would describe differently later, depending on what they had assumed about her when she walked in. The ballroom was perfectly quiet. Then the applause began. It started somewhere near the back, unhurried, from a retired judge who had been watching the evening unfold with the appreciation of someone who had seen a great many things and recognized quality when it appeared. Then, a city councillor. Then, a shipping executive who had done business with the Hargrove Group for 11 years, and had always quietly suspected that the competence of the operation lived somewhere other than where the credit went. Daphne stood very still while it spread through the room. She had spent her entire adult life learning to make herself small. She did not know in that moment what to do with being seen. Real leaned slightly toward her. "You can breathe," he said quietly. She laughed, a short, surprised sound, and the tension in her shoulders released. 3 weeks after the gala, the trials were already in motion. Aldous Fenwick's legal team filed delays. The CFO had negotiated a plea arrangement in exchange for testimony. Sable Beaumont Fenwick had retained the most expensive defense attorney in Quebec, which in Real's experience meant she intended to fight everything and would lose most of it anyway, slowly and expensively. The Hargrove Group's operations had not slowed. In fact, the February shipping numbers were the strongest the organization had posted in 4 years. Real's new CFO, appointed on an interim basis, pending a formal search, had been, for the past 3 years, the woman who functioned as the organization's institutional memory in all but title. The appointment had been announced without ceremony. In a single internal memo that generated a significant number of very quiet conversations among people who had walked past her desk for years without looking up. One afternoon, late when the building had mostly emptied, Daphne stood at the window in what was now her office, a proper office, not the desk outside his, though the desk outside still existed, waiting for someone else to fill eventually, and looked at the river the way she had not let herself look at things for a long time. Just looking. Not cataloguing, not analyzing, just the river and the last of the winter light going orange across the water. Real appeared in the doorway with 2 coffees. She did not hear him come in, which was notable, because Daphne Okafor heard almost everything. "You've been here since 7, he said. "So have you?" He handed her a cup and stood beside her at the window. Below them, the St. Lawrence moved the way it always did, indifferent, continuous, unbothered by the particular dramas of the city above it. "I spoke to Petra," she said. "She asked how you knew to go to the storage box. I didn't. You told me. I was barely conscious. You were conscious enough." He looked at the river. "You were conscious for most of the things you did during that period, which is something you should probably give yourself credit for." She was quiet for a moment. "I keep thinking about the 6 weeks before. Whether I should have come to you sooner. You didn't know if you could trust me." "I know, but I also..." She stopped. There was something she had been carrying around since the motel room, since he'd said "I'm sorry," since the gala, that she had not found the right moment to set down. "I spent 3 years deciding I wasn't the kind of person whose conclusions would be taken seriously here, and I was wrong about that. But I also had help being wrong about it." He turned his head to look at her. "The structure you built," she said carefully. "The way information moved, the way visibility worked. She was choosing her words with the same precision she brought to everything. It wasn't designed to see people like me, and I think that cost you in the end as much as it cost me. He was silent for a long moment. Yes, he said. It did. I'm not saying that I know why you're saying it. He turned back to the window. And you're right. A pause. The board restructuring will address some of it. The rest, I don't know yet. But I know it's a problem I didn't see clearly enough until someone paid a fairly significant price to make it visible. She looked at him sideways. I'm billing you for the hospital visit. He almost smiled. Coming from Real Hargrove, almost was significant. The medical expenses were covered 3 weeks ago, he said. I know. I was joking. I know. I was confirming. He looked at her. Your mother's medical situation has also been addressed. I should have told you sooner. She went very still. She had not told him about her mother. She had not told anyone at the office about her mother. The care home bills were the reason she had been living, the way she had been living, quietly, carefully. Every expense calibrated against a monthly number that left very little margin for anything that wasn't essential. How did you? The Laval motel room. He kept his voice even. I noticed you had almost nothing. I looked into why. A pause. I should have been more observant 3 years ago. She pressed her lips together. For a moment, she did not trust herself to speak without her voice doing something she would not prefer. You didn't have to do that, she said when she could. I know. He looked out at the river. I wanted to. The river kept moving. The light was almost gone now, the orange fading to grey at the edges the way it did at the end of February in this city. That particular northern resignation to winter that people from warmer places never quite understood. I owe you a considerable amount, Real said. Professionally and otherwise, I intend to spend a reasonable period of time addressing that. A reasonable period. Yes. How long is reasonable? He looked at her. There was something in his expression that was not the boardroom version of him, not the man who ran a 40-story organization with the emotional temperature of a well-maintained machine. It was something quieter and considerably less certain, and it suited him in a way she had not expected. I was thinking indefinitely, he said. If that suits you. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked back at the river. I have conditions, she said. I assumed you would. The CFO title is permanent, not interim. Done. The new reporting structure is actually implemented, not just announced. Done. And she said, the next time someone in this building assumes the woman with the folders doesn't understand what's happening in the room. She paused. I'd like it noted that she probably understood it better than anyone. He was quiet for a moment. I'll put it in writing, he said. She smiled. Not the small, careful expression she had trained herself into over years of making herself inconspicuous. A real one. The kind that changed her whole face. Outside, Montreal moved the way it always did. North, cold, relentless, beautiful. The woman everyone had overlooked had become the one no one in that building would look past again. And the man who had nearly lost everything to a plan he never saw coming, finally understood something he should have known 3 years earlier. That the most dangerous thing in any room was never the person with the loudest voice or the sharpest suit. It was the quiet one with the numbers, who noticed everything, and had been waiting, patiently, precisely, invisibly, for someone worth trusting with what she knew.